Taemin pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck. Far below, the last human ships were leaving Earth's orbit. The massive cargo vessels looked like metal whales swimming through the darkness of space. Behind them, sleek, warships followed like protective sharks. Soon, they would all be gone. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with excited voices. Aliens from 100 different worlds stood in groups, talking and laughing, their strange languages mixed together into a happy noise. Today was a celebration for them. Today they were finally getting rid of the humans. "Good riddance," said Councillor Rathcon, his blue skin gleaming under the chamber lights. His species, the Kalari, had always been the loudest voices against humanity. "Now we can have real peace in the galaxy." Other council members nodded their various heads in agreement. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales or fur or skin that changed colors. But they all agreed on one thing. Humans were trouble. Ambassador Taemin turned away from the window. He was the only human left in the council building. Soon he would leave too. His people had made their choice, and he would follow them into exile. The vote had been close at first. Some alien species had spoken for humanity. They remembered the times humans had helped them. They talked about human traders who brought rare goods to distant worlds. They mentioned human doctors who had saved alien lives during the plague outbreaks in the Outer Rim, but fear had won in the end. Fear always did. 3 months ago, humans had fought a war against space pirates in the Vega system. The pirates had been kidnapping alien children and selling them as slaves. No one else would stop them. The galactic peacekeepers said they needed more evidence. The local governments said it was not their problem, so the humans went to war. Captain Hyunwoo had led the attack. His battle fleet had destroyed the pirate bases in just 2 weeks. They freed over 10,000 alien children and returned them to their families. The pirates who survived were handed over to galactic courts for trial. It should have been a victory for justice. Instead, it became the reason for humanity's exile. They are too violent, the council members had said. They solve problems with weapons instead of words. They are a danger to galactic peace. The trial had lasted 3 days. Alien lawyers spoke about human aggression. They showed videos of human warships firing their guns. They talked about human military strength as if it was a disease. Captain Hyunwoo had stood before the council to defend his actions. He was a small man with graying hair and calm eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "We saved those children because no one else would," he had said. Sometimes words are not enough. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right. The council had not wanted to hear about fighting. They wanted to hear about peace talks and diplomatic solutions. They wanted promises that humans would give up their weapons and become pacifists, like the rest of the galaxy. President Saiwoo had spoken for Earth's government. She was a strong woman with silver hair who had led humanity through many crises. But even she could not change the council's mind. "We will not give up our right to defend ourselves and others," she had declared. "If that makes us unwelcome here, then we will leave." And now they were leaving. Taemin watched the last transport ship disappear into hyperspace. Its engines left a brief flash of blue light, and then it was gone. Earth looked strange without the orbital stations and defense, platforms that had protected it for centuries. The humans had taken everything with them. "Where will they go?" asked a small voice behind him. Taemin turned to see Dr. So Young gathering her research files. She was a xenobiologist who had spent years studying alien life forms. Her work had helped create new medicines that saved lives across the galaxy, but that did not matter now. She was human, so she had to leave. "Beyond council space," Taemin replied. "Captain Hyunwoo found star systems far from here. Empty worlds where we can build new homes." Dr. So Young nodded sadly. She picked up a small device and began uploading her research to Earth's databases. Decades of scientific work flowed through the quantum link to human space. At least knowledge could travel faster than ships. "It is strange," she said while the data transferred. "They say we are violent, but we are the ones being forced to leave our home." Through the chamber's main speakers, Chairman Veltar called for attention. He was the leader of the Galactic Council, an ancient being whose species had lived in space for thousands of years. His voice carried the weight of authority. "Today marks a new beginning," he announced. "For too long, our galaxy has been troubled by conflict and war. The human species has chosen exile rather than peace. We wish them well in their distant homes, but we cannot allow their violent nature to threaten our civilization any longer." Applause filled the chamber. Aliens clapped their hands, tentacles, or claws in celebration. Some made musical sounds. That meant joy in their cultures. They truly believed they had made the galaxy safer. Taemin felt sick listening to them. These beings had forgotten so much. They had forgotten who protected their trade routes from pirates. They had forgotten who rescued their people from natural disasters. They had forgotten who stood guard while they slept safely in their beds. Colonel Jin Ho appeared at Taemin's side. He was a military officer who had served as Earth's security attaché to the Council. His uniform was crisp and clean, but his eyes showed the strain of recent events. "The last diplomatic shuttle is ready," Jin Ho said quietly. "We should go." Taemin looked around the chamber one more time. He had worked here for 15 years, trying to build bridges between humanity and the other species. He had made friends among the aliens. Some of them had even voted against the exile order, but not enough. Fear had been stronger than friendship. As they walked toward the exit, Taemin heard Counselor Rathkon speaking to a group of reporters. "The humans always claimed they were protecting us," Rathkon said with a laugh. "But who will protect us? From the protectors? Better to live in peace without their warships and weapons." Dr. So Young heard this and stopped walking. For a moment, Taemin thought she might turn around and argue, but she just shook her head and continued toward the shuttle. "They will learn," she said softly. "Someday, they will understand what they have lost." The diplomatic shuttle was small but comfortable. It would take them to the jump point where a human fleet waited to escort them home. As they lifted off from the council station, Taemin watched the massive structure shrink below them. The station was a marvel of engineering, built by dozens of species working together. Humans had helped construct the quantum communication arrays that kept the galaxy connected. Human engineers had designed the life support systems that allowed so many different beings to live and work together. Now it would have to function without them. Captain Yunwoo's voice came over the shuttle's communication system. His battle fleet was waiting at the edge of council space, engines ready for the journey to humanity's new home. "All ships are accounted for," he reported. "We are ready to depart on your signal." Colonel Jin Ho took the communication device. "This is the last shuttle from the council station. All diplomatic personnel are aboard and safe." "Understood," Captain Hyunwoo replied. "Beginning jump sequence in 60 seconds. Taemin closed his eyes and tried not to think about what they were leaving behind. Earth would survive. Humanity would survive. They had found good worlds in the outer galaxy, far from council space. They would build new cities and new lives, but something would be lost forever. For all their talk of peace, the council had just made the galaxy a more dangerous place. They had sent away the one species willing to fight for justice. They had chosen the illusion of safety over real protection. The shuttle shuddered as it entered hyperspace. When Taemin opened his eyes again, the council station was gone. Behind them lay everything humanity had built in galactic civilization. Ahead lay exile and uncertainty. In the distance, warning sensors at the galaxy's edge detected something moving in the dark space between stars. But those sensors belonged to human deep space monitoring stations, and humans were no longer part of the galactic community. The warnings would go unheeded. The Watchers were gone. 3 months had passed since the human ships disappeared into deep space. The galaxy had never been more peaceful. Trade routes that once echoed with the rumble of human cargo vessels now carried only alien ships. The silence was exactly what the Galactic Council had wanted. On the council station, Chairman Veltar reviewed the monthly reports with satisfaction. Crime rates had dropped across civilized space. There had been no military incidents, no unauthorized use of weapons, no aggressive responses to piracy. The other species were finally learning to solve their problems through discussion and compromise. "The humans were clearly the source of our troubles," Veltar told his advisors. "Look at these numbers. Peace everywhere." His advisors nodded agreement. They were all career diplomats who had spent decades promoting non-violence. To them, the absence of conflict meant success. They did not ask why the trade reports showed strange gaps in the supply chains for rare minerals. They did not wonder why some shipping companies had quietly gone out of business. Far from the council station, on the research planet New Geneva, Colonel Jin-Ho stared at his computer screen with growing worry. The numbers he was seeing made no sense. Energy readings from the automated monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge were showing impossible things. "Lieutenant Commander Yunji," he called across the control room. "Come look at this." Yunji was a young officer with a gift for analyzing sensor data. She had been working with the Deep Space Monitoring Network since graduating from the military academy. When she saw Jin-Ho's screen, her face went pale. "These readings are wrong," she said. "They have to be. Ships cannot be this big." The data showed massive objects moving through the dark space beyond the galaxy's rim. The objects were huge, larger than anything in the Council's databases. Larger than the biggest space stations, larger than moons, and they were moving toward the galaxy. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensors," Jin-Ho ordered. "Check for equipment failures, solar interference, anything that might explain this." Yunji worked for hours, testing every piece of equipment in the monitoring network. But the sensors were working perfectly. The massive objects were real, and they were getting closer. Jin-Ho sent an encrypted message to Earth's new colonies beyond Council space. The message would take weeks to reach human territory, but he had to warn them. Something was coming from the void between galaxies, and it was bigger than anything they had ever seen. Meanwhile, on the Council homeworld of Zentara, Tai Min was learning about a different kind of problem. He had been living in exile for 3 months now, staying in a small apartment while he waited for transport to human space. The Council had allowed him to remain temporarily to help with the transfer of diplomatic records. Every day, he watched the news broadcasts and read the economic reports. The galaxy was peaceful, but it was also struggling. Supply chains that had depended on human traders were breaking down. Raw materials from dangerous mining worlds were no longer reaching the markets because no one wanted to risk the hazardous journeys. Humans had not just been warriors. They had been the galaxy's risk-takers, the ones willing to go where others feared to travel. Now, those dangerous but necessary jobs were going undone. "The economy will adjust," Councillor Rathcan assured the news reporters. "We do not need human recklessness to maintain our civilization." But Taemin could see the cracks forming. Prices for rare metals were rising. Some colony worlds were reporting shortages of medical supplies that had once been delivered by human cargo ships. The peaceful galaxy was slowly strangling itself. On Earth's new research station in the Outer Rim, Professor Min-Ho was making discoveries that would have terrified the Council if they had known about them. He was a quantum archaeologist, someone who studied the traces of ancient civilizations using advanced scanning technology. For months, he had been analyzing ruins scattered across the galaxy. Most of the ruins were millions of years old, left behind by species that had vanished long before any current civilization arose. But the pattern of their disappearance was disturbing. Every few million years, the galaxy's dominant civilizations simply stopped existing. There were no signs of war between species, no evidence of plague or natural disaster. The advanced races just vanished, leaving only empty worlds and crumbling cities. Professor Min-Ho called his research assistant, Dr. Hai Won, to review his latest findings. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of ancient ruins. Every major civilization that ever existed in this galaxy disappeared at roughly the same time, and it has happened at least 4 times in the past 20 million years. Dr. Hai Wan studied the data carefully. She was an expert in xenoarchaeology, trained to understand the cultures of extinct alien species. The pattern Professor Min-Ho had found was unlike anything in their textbooks. "What could cause something like this?" she asked. "What force could destroy entire civilizations across the galaxy at once?" Professor Min-Ho had been wondering the same thing. His quantum scanners could detect traces of ancient technology, even devices that had been destroyed millions of years ago. What he found in the ruins was always the same: advanced weapons that had been fired once and then never used again. They were preparing for something, he said. Every civilization that vanished had been building weapons. Massive weapons, more powerful than anything we can imagine. But they were not fighting each other. They were all aiming their guns at the same target. What target? Professor Minho manipulated the holographic display, showing the positions of the ancient weapons. Every gun, every missile launcher, every energy cannon had been pointed toward the dark space outside the galaxy. Something comes from out there, he said quietly. Something that made every advanced civilization in the galaxy arm themselves for war, and then they all disappeared anyway. Back on the council station, the first reports of trouble were dismissed as minor technical problems. An automated distress beacon from the outer rim colony of Kepler 442 had stopped transmitting. The council's communication specialists assumed it was a routine equipment failure. "These things happen," the duty officer told his supervisor. "We will send a repair crew when one becomes available." But there was no repair crew to send. The humans had always handled the dangerous missions. To the galaxy's edge, their ships were built for long journeys into unknown space. Their crews were trained for emergency repairs in hostile environments. Now the council had to rely on civilian contractors who charged high fees and took weeks to organize simple missions. By the time anyone reached Kepler 442, it would be too late to matter. On New Geneva, Lieutenant Commander Yunji was working around the clock to analyze the sensor data from the galaxy's edge. The massive objects were still approaching, but their technology was unlike anything in human or alien databases. "They are not using conventional engines," she reported to Colonel Jinho. "The energy signature suggests some kind of biological propulsion system, and the ships themselves, they look more grown than built." Jinho studied the long-range images that Yunji had assembled from multiple sensor arrays. The objects did look organic, like enormous sea creatures swimming through space. But they were clearly artificial constructs, designed by some form of intelligence. "How long until they reach the outer colonies?" he asked. Yunji ran the calculations. "At their current speed, approximately 6 months. But, sir, there is something else. The objects are not heading for human space. They are moving toward the galactic core, toward council territory." Jinho felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever was coming from the void, it was aimed directly at the heart of galactic civilization, and the council had no idea it was coming. He tried to send a warning message to the council station, but the communication channels had been closed when the humans were exiled. The diplomatic frequencies were blocked. The emergency channels were restricted to council members only. The people who needed to hear the warning had made sure they could not receive it. As the months passed, more outer rim colonies went silent. The council continued to dismiss these incidents as technical problems or natural disasters. They had convinced themselves that their peaceful galaxy was safe from all threats. On Zentara, Tai Min watched the news broadcasts with growing alarm. The economic problems were getting worse, but that was not what worried him most. It was the silence from the frontier worlds. The council was not investigating the lost colonies because they did not want to admit they needed help. Dr. So Young had finally reached human space and was sending regular reports back to the exiled diplomats still in council territory. The human colonies were thriving in their new homes, building cities and establishing trade with the few alien species who lived beyond the council's borders. But her latest message contained disturbing news. Human deep space sensors were detecting signs of massive destruction in the galactic rim. Entire star systems were going dark, their energy signatures simply vanishing from long-range scans. "It is as if something is eating the light itself," Dr. So Young reported. "Whatever is happening out there, it is moving toward the galaxy's center, toward council space." Tai Min tried one more time to contact Chairman Veltar directly. The attack came without warning. At 0347 Galactic Standard Time, the Kepler 442 colony simply vanished. One moment, the orbital monitoring station was transmitting routine status reports. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space where a thriving world of 2 million beings had existed for 3 centuries. The first emergency alerts reached the Galactic Council at 0352. Chairman Veltar was awakened in his private chambers by the urgent chiming of the crisis communications system. His aide, a nervous young Kalari named Thekmol, brought him the initial reports with trembling hands. "Sir, we are receiving distress signals from multiple systems in the outer rim. The transmissions are disturbing." Veltar reviewed the data on his personal display. The reports made no sense. Entire planets were disappearing from sensor arrays. Ships that went to investigate never returned. The few escape pods that managed to flee carried survivors speaking of impossible things. They came from nowhere, gasped Captain Yultara of the merchant vessel Star of Kelthara. Her ship had barely escaped from the Vega system before it was consumed. Ships the size of moons, but alive somehow. They did not attack our defenses. They ate them. Veltar dismissed the early reports as panic and confusion. Battle stress could make people see things that were not there. But as the hours passed, the reports became impossible to ignore. System after system was going dark across the galactic rim. By midday, the Council's military advisors were forced to admit the truth. Something was systematically destroying the outer colonies, and it was moving toward the galactic core with frightening speed. "We must mobilize the peacekeeping fleets," declared Admiral Kasteth of the Zentaran Navy. "Whatever this threat is, we will meet it with all our strength." But the peacekeeping fleets were not designed for war. They were police forces, equipped with non-lethal weapons and crowd control systems. Their ships were built for chasing smugglers and breaking up trade disputes, not fighting an enemy that could consume entire worlds. Within 6 hours of the first attack, the Council's military commanders were sending desperate requests for heavier weapons. The weapons stockpiles they found were pathetically small. Decades of enforced pacifism had left the galaxy nearly defenseless. "Where are the battle cruisers?" Admiral Kasteth demanded. "Where are the planetary defense systems?" The answer was simple and terrifying. The humans had taken them. Every serious warship, every heavy weapon system, every piece of military technology that could fight a real war had been built by humans or with human assistance. And the humans were gone. On the council station, Councillor Rath Khan stood before the emergency assembly with his usual confidence shattered. His blue skin had turned pale with fear, and his voice shook as he spoke. "We must contact the human colonies immediately," he announced. "We need their help." The words tasted like poison in his mouth. 3 months ago, he had been celebrating humanity's exile. Now he was begging for their return. Chairman Veltar tried to maintain dignity in the face of disaster. "We will consider all options," he said carefully. "But first, we must determine if this threat can be resolved through diplomatic means." The alien ships that emerged from the void between galaxies showed no interest in diplomacy. They were massive biomechanical constructs that looked more grown than built. Their hulls were covered in what appeared to be organic armor, and they moved through space like living creatures swimming through an ocean. The first contact attempt was made by Ambassador Thelvok of the Diplomatic Corps. He transmitted standard greeting protocols in 17 languages, offering peaceful negotiations and cultural exchange. The alien ships responded by consuming his vessel. The biomechanical constructs simply opened sections of their hulls and drew the diplomatic ship inside. There were no weapons fired, no shields raised. The ship was just absorbed like food being swallowed. Within hours, the consumed vessel reappeared as part of the alien ship's hull. The metal and technology had been integrated into the creature's body, making it larger and stronger. On New Geneva, Colonel Jin Ho watched the invasion unfold through long-range sensors. His monitoring station was far from the battle zone, but the quantum communication arrays allowed him to track the destruction in real time. "They are not conquering," he reported to Lieutenant Commander Yunji. "They are harvesting. Every ship they consume makes them stronger." The biomechanical constructs showed a terrifying intelligence in their attack patterns. They targeted the most advanced worlds first, absorbing the technology and industrial capacity of each civilization they encountered. With every victory, they became more powerful. Yunji studied the tactical displays with growing horror. "Sir, at this rate of expansion, they will reach the galactic core in less than 2 months. The Council fleets cannot stop them." Jin-Ho knew she was right. The peacekeeping forces were being slaughtered in every engagement. Their light weapons could barely scratch the organic armor of the invading ships. When the bio-constructs fired back, entire fleets simply ceased to exist. The colonel activated the emergency communication link to human space. The message would take weeks to reach Earth's new colonies, but he had to try. Priority alert to fleet. "Command, he transmitted. "The galaxy is under attack by unknown hostile forces. Council military forces are ineffective. Recommend immediate defensive preparations for human colonies." Back on the council station, Chairman Veltar was finally forced to admit the scope of the disaster. Half of the galactic rim was already gone. Billions of beings had been killed or consumed. The invading force showed no signs of slowing down. "We need the humans," he told his advisors in a private meeting. "Their weapons, their ships, their knowledge of warfare, without them we will all die." But contacting the humans was proving impossible. The Council had destroyed most of the communication links to human space when they voted for exile. Few remaining channels were controlled by diplomatic protocols that required weeks of bureaucratic approval. Councillor Rathcon volunteered to make the journey personally. "I will take a fast ship to human territory," he declared. "I will beg them to return and help us." "It will take months to reach human space," Veltar pointed out. "We do not have months." The truth was crushing. The Council's decision to exile humanity had not just removed their defenders. It had cut the communication lines that could bring those defenders back in time to matter. On Zentara, Taimin received an urgent visit from Council security forces. They had come to ask for his help in contacting the human colonies. The same people who had thrown him out 3 months ago were now desperate for his assistance. "You have diplomatic codes," said Security Chief Mulcar. "You can reach human territory faster than our official channels." Taimin looked at the alien officer with sad eyes. "The codes were deactivated when the exile order was signed. I have no more access to human space than you do." The security chief left empty-handed. Every avenue for contacting the humans had been deliberately closed by the Council's own actions. As the biomechanical constructs swept through the galaxy, consuming world after world, the survivors began to understand the true scope of their mistake. The humans had not been warmongers. They had been the galaxy's immune system, the defenders who stood ready to fight threats that others could not even imagine. Dr. So Young, now safely in human territory, received fragmentary reports of the invasion through the few remaining quantum relays. She worked frantically to analyze the alien technology and find weaknesses that could be exploited. But her research stations were thousands of light years from the battle zone. Even if she discovered a way to stop the bioconstructs, there was no way to get the information to the dying worlds in time. On Earth's new capital world of New Busan, Admiral Jae-won convened an emergency military council. The reports from the Galactic Core were horrifying, but they also presented a terrible choice. "We could help them," she told the assembled officers. "Our battle fleets could reach the invasion zone in 6 weeks. We have the weapons to fight these creatures." Captain Do-hyun, now promoted to fleet commander, studied the tactical reports. "The casualties would be enormous. These bioships are stronger than anything we have faced, and we would be fighting to save the people who exiled us." President Siwoo had the final word on humanity's response. She stood before the council chambers on New Busan, looking out at the stars that held their former enemies. "They made their choice," she said quietly. "They chose to believe we were the threat. They chose to send us away rather than stand with us. Now they must face the consequences of that choice." The decision was painful but logical. Humanity had limited resources in their new colonies. Sending their fleets to save the Council could leave human space defenseless if the bioconstructs turned their attention to the outer galaxy. But the moral weight of abandoning billions of innocent beings pressed heavily on every human heart. They were watching an entire civilization die, and they had the power to help. In the dying systems of the galactic rim, the few survivors who managed to escape carried the same message. They spoke of massive bioships that consumed everything in their path. They described weapons that turned matter into energy and creatures that grew stronger with every victory. But most importantly, they carried a message of regret. Deep beneath the surface of New Busan, Dr. Haiwan worked through her third sleepless night in the Xeno-archaeological archives. The reports from the Galactic Core had driven her to dig deeper into the ancient ruins data that Professor Min Ho had discovered. What she found in the quantum archaeological records made her blood run cold. The ruins were not random. They were not separate civilizations that had simply vanished over time. They were warning systems, built by dying races to alert future generations about the creatures now consuming the galaxy. They called them the Devourers, she whispered to her research assistant, transcribing the ancient text fragments that the quantum scanners had recovered. Every few million years, they emerge from the void between galaxies to feed on intelligent life. The texts told a horrifying story. The Devourers were not just destroyers, they were harvesters. They consumed entire civilizations and absorbed their knowledge, their technology, their biological essence. Each feeding cycle made them stronger and more intelligent, but the most terrifying revelation was yet to come. As Dr. He-Wan decoded more of the ancient warnings, she discovered that the last great civilization to face the Devourers had tried to warn others. They had sent messages across the galaxy, begging other species to unite and fight together. Those warnings had been ignored. The other civilizations had dismissed the messengers as warmongers and extremists. They had chosen isolation over alliance, peace over preparation. History repeats itself, Dr. He-Wan said to herself, thinking of humanity's recent exile. We were not the first to be cast out for trying to warn others. She immediately sent her findings to Earth's government and military commanders. If humanity was going to survive what was coming, they needed to understand exactly what they were facing. On the bridge of the human battleship Incheon, Captain Dongmin received fragmentary transmissions from the invasion zone. The messages were always the same, desperate pleas for help from civilizations facing extinction. "Anyone who can hear this, please respond," came a weak signal from the Rigel system. "Our world is under attack by creatures we cannot fight. Our weapons are useless. They are consuming our cities, our people. If anyone has knowledge of how to stop them, please help us." By the time the message reached human space, the Rigel system was already gone. The speed of the Devourers' advance was accelerating as they absorbed more technology and resources from each conquered world. Captain Dongmin had served in the human military for 20 years. He had fought pirates, rescued colonists from natural disasters, and defended trade routes from raiders, but he had never faced an enemy like this. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving similar distress calls from 17 different systems. All of them are requesting immediate military assistance." Dongmin looked at the tactical display showing the galaxy's current situation. The Devourers had consumed nearly 60% of the galactic rim and were pushing steadily toward the core worlds. The Council's remaining fleets were scattered and desperate, trying to evacuate civilians from the path of destruction. "Any word from Fleet Command about our orders?" he asked. "No, sir. President Siwoo is still debating whether to intervene. The debate on New Busan was tearing the human government apart. Admiral Jae-won argued passionately for immediate intervention, while other military leaders worried about leaving human space defenseless. Every day we wait, billions more die, Jae-won told the Emergency Council session. We have the weapons and ships to make a difference. How can we just watch them be slaughtered? Defense Minister Kang Jun disagreed. The Council chose to exile us rather than stand with us. They made it clear that they consider us a threat to their civilization. Why should we sacrifice our people to save those who cast us out? President Siwoo listened to both sides with a heavy heart. The moral arguments for helping were clear, but so were the practical dangers. Humanity's new colonies were still vulnerable. If the Devourers defeated the combined human and alien fleets, there would be nothing left to protect human space. What? Does our intelligence tell us about enemy capabilities? She asked. Colonel Jin Ho presented his analysis via secure communication link from New Geneva. The biomechanical constructs appear to grow stronger with each victory. They have absorbed the technology of dozens of civilizations. Their current capabilities exceed anything in our databases. The Colonel's report included battle recordings that had been recovered from escape pods. The videos showed Devourer ships simply absorbing Council vessels, integrating their hulls and weapons into the biomechanical constructs. Each absorbed ship made the creatures larger and more powerful. Traditional military tactics are proving ineffective, Jinho continued. The enemy adapts to any strategy within hours. They learn from every engagement and adjust their defenses accordingly. Meanwhile, in the ruins of what had once been the prosperous Altair system, Councillor Rathkan transmitted what would be his final message to the galaxy. His homeworld of Kelthera was under attack, and the biomechanical constructs had already consumed 3 of the system's 5 planets. To anyone who receives this transmission, Rathcon spoke into his emergency communicator. We were wrong. The humans were not our enemies. They were our guardians, and we drove them away in our fear and ignorance. The counselor's voice broke as explosions shook his bunker. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the bioships descending from orbit like falling mountains. They moved with organic grace, their hull surfaces rippling as they prepared to feed. The creatures attacking us are not invaders, he continued. They are harvesters. They have done this before, countless times across the ages. The ancient ruins we found throughout the galaxy, they were warning beacons left by previous victims. A massive tentacle, kilometers long and covered in metallic scales, punched through the bunker's roof. Rathcon could hear the screams of his people being consumed by the biomechanical constructs. We had centuries to prepare, he gasped into the communicator. The humans tried to keep us ready, tried to maintain our defenses, but we chose weakness over strength, isolation over unity. We chose the illusion of peace over the reality of danger. The transmission ended abruptly as Kelthara joined the growing list of consumed worlds. On the council station itself, Chairman Veltar made one final attempt to contact human space. He activated the emergency diplomatic channels that had been sealed since the exile order, broadcasting on every frequency that might reach the outer galaxy. This is Chairman Veltar of the Galactic Council, he transmitted. I am speaking directly to the human government and military forces. We formally request immediate assistance against the hostile forces that are destroying our civilization. The chairman's voice carried none of its usual authority. He sounded like what he was, a desperate leader watching his people die for decisions he had supported. We acknowledge that we were wrong to exile your species, he continued. We understand, now that your weapons and warrior culture were not threats to galactic peace. They were necessary defenses against threats we refused to see. The message was broadcast continuously for 6 hours before the council station's communication arrays were destroyed by a devourer bioship that had reached the galactic core. Chairman Veltar's final words were lost in static as the station itself was consumed. Commander Boram, monitoring the invasion from humanity's deep space observation post, analyzed the attack patterns with growing understanding. The devourers were not random destroyers. They were methodical harvesters following an ancient plan. They target the most advanced civilizations first, she reported to Earth's military command. They absorb the technology and industrial capacity, then use those resources to attack the next targets. It is a feeding strategy that has been refined over millions of years. Her analysis revealed the true scope of the threat. The devourers were not just consuming the current galactic civilization. They were preparing for their next migration to another galaxy, gathering the resources they would need for the journey through intergalactic space. Earth needs to know, Boram transmitted. If they succeed in harvesting this galaxy, they will be strong enough to consume any civilization they encounter. This is not just about saving the Council worlds. This is about preventing them from becoming unstoppable. Dr. So Young, working from the research facilities in human space, made her own disturbing discovery. The biological samples she had collected from devourer attack sites showed traces of DNA from dozens of species, some extinct for millions of years. They do not just consume technology, she reported. They preserve the genetic patterns of every species they harvest. They are collecting the biological essence of entire galactic civilizations. The implications were staggering. The devourers were not just destroyers. They were cosmic collectors, gathering samples of all intelligent life in the universe. Each galaxy they consumed added to their vast genetic library. On the dying world of Proxima Prime, the last survivors of the human diplomatic mission watched the bioships descend from orbit. Taemin had stayed behind when the other human diplomats evacuated, helping coordinate refugee evacuations from the Council worlds. This is Ambassador Taemin, he transmitted. On the emergency frequencies, 6 months after the invasion began, the galaxy's core fell silent. The last transmission from Council space was a simple automated message repeating the same words over and over. Harvest complete, moving to secondary targets. President Saiwu stood before the emergency assembly on New Busan, looking out at the faces of humanity's leaders. Every person in the room carried the weight of the same terrible knowledge. they could have made a difference. Human fleets could have reached the invasion zone in time to save billions of lives, but they had chosen to honor their exile instead. Admiral Jaewon will present the military assessment, President Saiwoo announced, her voice heavy with unspoken guilt. Admiral Jaewon activated the holographic display showing the galaxy's current status. Nearly 90% of the galactic core was dark, its civilizations consumed by the biomechanical constructs. Only scattered refugee populations remained, hiding in asteroid fields and dead systems. Our analysts believe we could have made a significant impact if we had intervened immediately, the Admiral reported. Human battle doctrine and weapons technology were specifically designed to counter threats like the Devourers. Our ships could have provided the backbone for an effective resistance. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Defense Minister Kang Jun shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We made the decision we thought was best for humanity's survival, he said. We could have known, interrupted Dr. Hai Wan via communication link from the archaeological archives. The ancient ruins told us everything. The Devourers follow a predictable cycle. They appear every few million years to harvest advanced civilizations. If we had studied the warnings instead of dismissing them, we would have been prepared. Her research had revealed the full scope of the galactic catastrophe. The ruins scattered throughout the galaxy were not random remnants of dead civilizations. They were components of a vast early warning system built by the survivors of previous harvests to alert future generations. The last civilization to face the Devourers tried to warn everyone, Dr. Hai Wan continued. They sent envoys to every inhabited world, begging other species to unite and prepare for war. Those envoys were rejected as warmongers and cast out, the B. Parallel to humanity's recent exile was painfully clear. The cycle had repeated itself. A warrior species trying to warn a pacifist civilization, only to be rejected and exiled for their efforts. Captain Hyun-woo, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, spoke from his flagship at the edge of human space. The question now is not what we could have done. It is what we will do when they come for us. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the consumed regions of the galaxy. The biomechanical constructs were stirring, testing their new capabilities, with technology absorbed from dozens of civilizations. Human intelligence estimated they would begin probing the outer galaxy within months. We will be ready this time, Admiral Hyun-woo declared. We will not make the same mistakes as the Council. We will fight. But readiness came with a terrible cost. Humanity's new colonies were transforming themselves into fortress worlds, their peaceful settlements replaced by military installations and weapon factories. The exile that was supposed to free them from the burden of galactic defense had only made that burden heavier. On the refugee station New Hope, hidden in the asteroid field of a dead system, Thai men worked with the few thousand survivors who had escaped the harvest. The station was a collection of salvaged ships and emergency habitats, home to the last representatives of dozens of extinct civilizations. Among the refugees was Counselor Rath Khan, who had somehow survived the destruction of Kelthera. The once proud alien politician now spent his days writing memoirs that no one would ever read, documenting the Council's greatest mistake. We feared human violence, he told Dr. So Young during one of her medical visits to the station. But violence is sometimes the only answer to greater violence. We chose the illusion of safety over the reality of protection. Dr. So Young nodded as she checked the counselor's health readings. The stress of watching his civilization die had aged him decades in just a few months. Fear makes people do foolish things, she replied gently. But it also makes them wise, if they survive long enough to learn. The human doctor had been working tirelessly to care for the refugee population. Many of the survivors suffered from psychological trauma that had no easy cure. They had watched their entire civilizations disappear, their worlds consumed by creatures beyond their understanding. Will the humans help us? Asked a young Altarian whose family had died in the harvest. Will they fight the monsters? Dr. So Young could not give her an honest answer. The human government was still debating whether to accept the refugees, let alone whether to fight on their behalf. The wounds of exile ran deep, and many humans felt no obligation to help those who had cast them out. On Earth's new research stations, Professor Minho worked with Dr. Haiwan to decode the complete warning system left by the ancient civilizations. What they found was both hopeful and terrifying. The Devourers can be stopped, Professor Minho reported to the Government Council. Previous civilizations have driven them back before, but it requires unity and sacrifice on a galactic scale. The ancient texts described weapons that could wound the biomechanical constructs, strategies that could disrupt their feeding patterns, and technologies that could protect worlds from harvest. But every successful defense had required the cooperation of dozens of species working together. The problem is trust, Dr. Haiwan added. Each civilization that faced the Devourers struggled with the same issue we face now. How do you unite species that fear and distrust each other? How do you convince pacifists to become warriors? The answer, according to the ancient records, was usually that you could not. Most galactic civilizations chose isolation over alliance, just as the Council had chosen to exile humanity rather than work with them. On the bridge of the human destroyer Busan, Captain Do Hyun monitored the long-range sensors that watched the galactic core. His ship was part of the early warning network that would alert human space when the Devourers began their expansion toward the outer colonies. Movement detected in Sector 77 Alpha, his sensor officer reported. Biomechanical constructs are beginning to probe the intermediate systems. The Devourers were testing the defenses of the scattered worlds that lay between the galactic core and the outer rim. These were mostly uninhabited systems or primitive colonies that had not yet developed space travel, but they would serve as stepping stones for the creature's advance toward human space. Captain Do Hyun opened a communication channel to Fleet Command. Admiral, the enemy is beginning their expansion phase. Estimated time to contact with our outer defenses is 8 to 10 months. Admiral Hyun-woo received the report at his headquarters on the military world of New Sparta. The human colonies had been preparing for this moment since the invasion began, but he knew their defenses were still inadequate. Begin implementation of Protocol 7, he ordered. All civilian populations are to be evacuated from border worlds. All military assets are to concentrate at the primary defense line. Protocol 7 was humanity's last resort plan, a fighting retreat that would trade space for time while the human fleets inflicted maximum damage on the advancing Devourers. It was a strategy born from the knowledge that humanity could not win a direct confrontation with creatures that had consumed entire galactic civilizations. But it was also a strategy that required abandoning millions of refugees who had fled to human space-seeking protection. President Saiwu faced the most difficult decision of her presidency. The refugee populations could not be evacuated quickly enough to reach the inner defense line. Protecting them would mean spreading human forces too thin to mount an effective defense. "We cannot save everyone," Admiral Jae-won told her during a private meeting. "If we try to protect all the refugees, we will lose everything. The Devourers will harvest our colonies just as they harvested the Council worlds." The president looked out the window of her office at the lights of New Busan's capital city. Millions of humans had built new lives here after their exile from the galactic community. They deserved protection from the approaching horror. But so did the alien refugees who had come seeking sanctuary in human space. What would the Council have done? She asked. The Council would have chosen negotiation over confrontation, Admiral Jae-won replied. They would have tried to reason with creatures that have no interest in reason. That is why they are dead. In the end, President Saiwu chose a middle path that satisfied no one and saved too few. Some refugee populations would be protected within the human defense perimeter. Others would be given weapons and ships to defend themselves. The choice of who lived and who died would be made by lottery, the cold mathematics of limited resources. Tai Min received the news on New Hope Station with quiet resignation. His station had not been selected for protection. The few thousand survivors under his care would have to face the Devourers with salvaged weapons and aging ships. "It is what the Council would have done to us," Councillor Rathcon observed sadly. "Fear makes even good people choose selfishness over sacrifice."